Hello friends, welcome back. Hope you're doing well. I'm going to be working on a landscape today in Luminar Neo, sharing some ideas, some tips, some tricks, and some things that I think about every time I'm editing a landscape. Now, I've got a miniature course, a mini course coming out next week, all about editing these landscapes in Luminar Neo. If you'd like to learn more about that, I've got a link down below. You can join my newsletter as well, get my free 27-page ebook about Luminar Neo editing, and of course, my newsletter folks will be the first ones to hear about this course when it's ready. It's going to be to the point, covering a lot of details about editing landscapes. I know you're going to love it. Let's jump into this today, and I'll share you a few tips that I'll also be covering in more depth in the course. We're going to start with this photo. Now, speaking of starting, the photo started like this. I've already done some things here in Develop Raw, which is I started with lifting the shadows because, as you can see, it was rather dark. Pull down the highlights, increase the contrast. I made a slight warming and tint adjustment and sharpened the photo. And that's it. It got me from there to there. And now I'm ready to jump in to move number 2, which for me is super contrast. It just gives you so much control over the light. And I absolutely love what it allows me to do in my photos. Now, I will say that when I'm editing in with super contrast, it's always an experimentation. I'm just moving the sliders around until I figure out what works best for me in terms of adjusting the light. The light's the most important thing in any photograph, and getting it right early on in your edit, I think, is a huge thing. So this is giving me, it's pretty minor overall, but before and after, a nice little bump in the light in the places where I wanted it. And again, I got there through experimentation, but you will learn over time with super contrast kind of what works best for each photo, so you can kind of get to those results more quickly. Now, one of the things that I talk about quite often here, and of course in my mini course, is light, detail, and color. So I'm always focused on the light, and that kind of runs throughout an entire edit. And then I generally go to detail and then color at the end, or color grading if you want to call it that. What I'm going to do now is jump into detail, and I like to use structure for that. And a key component of any edit, and in particular with these landscapes, is masking. And there's a lot of masking tools, and I cover the use of really all of them in this mini course. But what I want to do here is go grab Object Select, and I want to get these mountains. And the reason I use Object Select here instead of a brush is because, number one, it does a good job of isolating them, but also because it's pretty accurate around those edges. I can grab some of these other ones as well, and that's going to help, but you'll notice when I get down here, it starts grabbing the whole thing. I don't want that, but I do want some other parts of that, so I'm going to back out of Object Select. They're still selected. I'm going to go into Brush, and I'm just going to paint along here with the brush just to get a little bit more of that. I'm going to grab a little bit down in here along the riverbank. And so that's a thing that I like to do, is kind of stack these brushes so that I can get as much as possible included in my mask, with a high degree of accuracy. So now that I've done that, I'm going to add a structure increase of about 20 to that area. All it does is give it a little bit of detail, a little bit of pop. And if you look at the before and the after, it also brightens it a little bit. But overall, because I'm only using the amount of 20, it's not a massive impact on the photo. Now, in thinking about light, one of the key features of this photo is the river, but it's a little bit too dark. So again, I come in with masking, and this time I'm grabbing a brush, and I'm just going to paint in here and grab that water, and I'll just mask it in with my brush. And I'm going kind of fast here. I recommend that you take your time and you zoom in. I'm going to shrink my brush and get up here as well because there's more water up in there. So something about like that. And what I want to do is make some slight adjustments to it because it's a focal point in the photo. It is the leading line, kind of taking your eye through the photograph. I want to brighten it a little bit, so I go about 3. And also it's kind of green, so I'm going to adjust the temperature and tint. I'm going to do like a -10 or 11 on both temperature and tint. So it's basically making it more blue and getting away from the magenta, so more green. So brighten it and adjust the color before and after, quick and easy. Now that I'm done with that, I'm going to close Develop and open it again. And this is something that you'll find in my editing. I use Develop all the time because honestly, it's just the best tool overall in Luminar, and it gives you so much power and control. What I want to do now is the sky, and I'm going to use the linear gradient to come in here and just kind of fade that into the top of those mountains. And what I want to do is slightly darken that area. So acting a little bit like a polarizer here, I'm just slightly darkening the sky. And while I'm at it, I'm going to drop the temperature a little bit, make that a little bit bluer, so like a -10 or 12. And I'm going to add a little bit of tint, so go to the right there, like +9 or 10. If you look at the before and the after, I use the linear gradient, and instead of like a specific like object mask or mask AI to target the sky because I want to fade that into that area as opposed to select the entire area. Okay, we're done there, and I'm going to jump into a color grade. And this is something I love to do is apply color. If you've been here before, you know that. In this case, I'm going to use color harmony. So brilliance and warmth for me is usually where I start on this tool. I think you just have to be careful because there's a lot of color tools in Luminar, and in color harmony specifically, there's a lot of color tools. There's 4. And I'm going to use 3 of them actually. So I'm going to split color warmth. I'm actually going to take the cool to -32, let's call it. And then here in the color balance, I'm going to take the midtones toward red at about a rate of 9. So, you know, not real high, but high enough. And then the highlights, I'm going to get into those. And I'm going to do about a 14 here on the red and about a -9 on magenta. And of course, if you look at the photo, there's way too much color there and it's overdone. And again, this is where masking comes in. And a lot of times when you're color grading a photo, you're color grading the whole thing and it works a lot. In this case, it's not working, partly because the numbers I chose, I've used multiple tools, it really stacks up. But it does work if you mask it. So I'm going to go ahead and apply a luminosity mask. One of my favorite kinds of masks, I use these copiously in my edits and in my mini course that I refer to. But it just allows you to isolate the different tonal areas. And what I want to do here is really focus more on the highlights. So I want to make sure that I get all of the highlights because I like those warmer colors that I added and the highlights. And then I'm going to fade that into some of the midtones, but really kind of avoid the shadows. So maybe something about like that. So you can see I got a good bit of the sky, a little bit of the light hitting the mountaintops, a little bit of the sand, tiny bit of the water. And now if you look at it, color balance or color harmony overall, much tamer overall look. So before and after. That's the power of not just masking, but also luminosity masking, especially on a color grade. Another tool that I love applying in my landscapes is Mystical, and I'll just come in and I'll just stick that on, usually, not always, but usually just across the entire photo. I'm just doing a 30 here. It gives a nice kind of softening, a little bit of that romantic lighting kind of mood to a photo. And then I want to move into another tool that I love, which is Accent AI and Sky Enhancer AI. And I'm going to use them both on this photo. I'm going to do about a 13 or so here on Accent AI and maybe about a 15 on a Sky Enhancer. Now what this does is create an impact across the entire photo. But once again, I'm going to use a mask here and I'm going to use a luminosity mask again because they're powerful and they allow me to really target specific tonal areas. This is also a way to apply this kind of edit non-globally, right? So locally, because anytime you're using a mask, it's a local edit, not a global edit, meaning it's only hitting part of the photo. And what I want to do here is just hit this across some of the midtones with a fade into the different tonal areas. So it's still hitting a fair amount of the photo, but it's not hitting the entire photo. And I'm getting a nice generous fade so it blends in nicely. So now if you look at it before and after, it's a much more subtle pop in the photo. I love to do that. And this edit, I'm going to wrap up with a minor adjustment at the end with develop, what I call a global adjustment. Coming back around at the very end, I start with global, which is the develop raw and super contrast. I go into a lot of local things with structure, color, all those kind of things. But sometimes I'll come back and wrap it up with a global adjustment, and I'll use develop for that. And in this case, what I want to do is, I feel like it's a little bit dark, so I'm going to lift the shadows a little bit. It's going to reduce a little bit of that heavier contrast overall look. And then sometimes I will also adjust temperature or tint. And in this case, I'm going to pull down the highlights, or excuse me, the temperature to make it a little bit bluer overall, cool it off. And that's a -12. So before and after, soften up some of the warm tones, brighten the shadows a little bit. And overall, I've got a really powerful edit from that starting point to that. Great color, nice distribution of light, good focal point. I just really like how this came together. And it's taking advantage of some of these tips. And there's more that I share in my mini course that's coming next week. Like I said, if you subscribe to my website's newsletter, you'll get that announcement next week. And you'll also get that 27-page ebook, plus some presets. There's a lot of stuff I'll be sharing with you. Check that out if you're interested. And thanks for stopping by today. I appreciate it. I'll be back soon with more videos. You guys take care. And until next time, adios.